So the other week on the show, we talked about how a right-wing businessman, billionaire, effectively bought the Republican Party and just made this colossal donation. I'm forgetting the exact number now, but you can go back and check on YouTube. You could watch the segment where we discuss that. Well, now, now we have a similar case, except maybe worse. Because I would argue that as bad as it is to have billionaires run our politics, what might be slightly worse than that is billionaire theocratic dictators who are brutal authoritarians buying our politics. So Eli Clifton says the following: Saudi lobbyist Norm Coleman, who by the way is a former Republican senator, oversees the flow of $94 million of dark money into GOP House races. The origins of that money is unknown. Filing shows Coleman is in regular contact with GOP congressional staffers, making requests on behalf of his clients in Riyadh. So let me rephrase this for you. Saudi Arabia spending nearly $100 million of dark money to buy the Republican Party. That's what's happening here. So let me go ahead and give you some of the specifics in responsible statecraft. Saudi lobbyist oversees millions in dark money GOP campaign donations. Experts question former Senator Norm Coleman's role as both foreign agent for Riyadh and Republican fundraiser. So this was originally in The Intercept. Last year, former Minnesota Senator Norm Coleman, one of the Republican Party's biggest fundraisers, had a request for 30 Republican congressional staffers. Coleman had helped many of their bosses' campaigns in his role atop an organization that raised and spent over $165 million in the 2020 election cycle. Quote, "At this time," wrote Coleman, "the kingdom would appreciate if your member of Congress would publicly welcome this step and call out the Houthis for their continuous obstruction of the political process." He was promoting a Saudi ceasefire initiative in Yemen that the Houthi rebels ultimately rejected. The rebels demanded that any such agreement would require the Saudis to fully lift the blockade of Yemen, which had contributed to more than 370,000 deaths. So this is what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen with our help, with our money, with our weapons, killing more than 370,000 people, blockading the country, starving the country, making it so medicine can't get into the country. This is what Saudi Arabia is doing with our help. Seems like a problem, doesn't it? His ask on behalf of the Embassy of Saudi Arabia wasn't an isolated request. Coleman wrote over 1,000 emails to House and Senate staffers in 2021 and 2022 as part of his paid work for Saudi Arabia. Coleman and several of his law firm colleagues are registered as foreign agents of the kingdom. The emails, as well as the details of the $175,000 per month contract between Saudi Arabia and Hogan Lovells, the law firm, are all contained in filings submitted to the Justice Department. The contract is part of the Saudi government's robust lobbying operation that saw the kingdom spend $21 million last year to gain influence in Washington, according to public filings. So what we're learning now is it's much more than $21 million. Basically giving $100 million to the Republican Party to get Republicans elected, and then trying to have the Republicans serve them, give them whatever they want. Because if there's one thing Saudi Arabia figured out, just like Israel figured this out, it is very easy to buy the American political system. All you got to do is spend, millions of lobbyist money, which is nothing to these guys. I mean, they make over $1 billion a day, and you'll get whatever you want. Get anything you want. Coleman enjoys a unique position of influence over congressional Republicans. He helped found the Congressional Leadership Fund Super PAC, where he serves as chair of the board, according to a current biography on his law firm profile. Coleman also serves as chair of the American Action Network, a tax-exempt social welfare group, an IRS designation that allows political advocacy and requires no disclosure of funding. In other words, it's a dark money group. So they go on to list here all these different groups he's affiliated with and he's running, and all the different kinds of lobbying that he does. And this is what he does now. This is his role now. He's a big money donor on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And previously, I think he's been a big money donor on behalf of various corporations and wealthy folks. But they go on to say this. Listen to this. Last September, the House voted on an amendment introduced by Representative Ro Khanna, calling for the U.S. to end virtually all aid to Saudi's war in Yemen. Only 11 House Republicans voted in favor of the amendment and 196 opposed it. Gee, I wonder why that is. Now, stop and think about it. It's not like the Republicans haven't used rhetoric from time to time very critical of Saudi Arabia. I mean, they think it's a hub of Islamic extremism, and you know what? They're right. These are Sunni fundamentalists. These are Salafists. And Republicans have pointed that out. Trump used to point that out. But wow, when it came time to actually vote on whether or not we should support a genocide led by Saudi Arabia, all except 11 Republicans said, yeah, I support the genocide led by Saudi Arabia. Why? Because they know where their bread is buttered. They know they're getting millions of dollars that helps their campaigns from this theocratic dictatorship. They know it. So they don't care. They're willing to get bought off. A similar amendment that same month, introduced by Representative Gregory Meeks, a Democrat of New York, included slightly softer language calling for a suspension of support for Saudi Air Force units involved in airstrikes on Yemeni civilians, but with several broad exceptions. On the Republican side, only 7 members of the House voted for the amendment, and 203 opposed it. So, the entire Republican Party has been bought by Saudi Arabia. Now, by the way, don't get it twisted. The Democrats are taking money from Saudi Arabia too, I'm sure. But the Democrats are not as brazen in their support. By the way, credit to Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders. They had worked together to pass a resolution basically saying, we're not going to help, we're not going to aid the Saudi genocide in Yemen anymore. You know what happened? Donald Trump, when he was president, vetoed it. And then you start to look into Trump and how sketchy his connections are. Like, for example, he took hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, from Saudi Arabia through his D.C. hotel when he was president. And then he turns around and gives Saudi Arabia a multi-billion-dollar weapons deal. And he looks the other way as they massacred Jamal Khashoggi, an American journalist. And then now, oh, would you look at that? He's getting, he's got a contract worth tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars with Saudi Arabia with their Live Golf Tour. Why are they giving him all this money? Why was Jared Kushner the recipient of $2 billion from Saudi Arabia in a financial deal? Why? Why? It's almost like they're paying for something. Could it be even potentially some of the classified documents that Trump had? Very, very possible. Very possible. But what we know is he served them in a sycophantic fashion, and the entire Republican Party is serving them in a sycophantic fashion. Make no mistake about it. Saudi Arabia has bought the Republicans in the House. They have. And they're copying the playbook, by the way, of Israel. Israel buys both parties, and they get whatever they want. And this is what we're dealing with Saudi Arabia now. So, not good. Not good. And look, I think in some ways it's fair to call this, what Norm Coleman is doing here, traitorous. I think it's fair to call it that. I don't think that's an extreme interpretation. None of this should even be allowed, by the way. None of it should. I mean, I'm not even in favor of billionaires and corporations spending on elections. Definitely not in favor of theocratic dictatorships who are currently committing genocides spending on elections. This is why we need clean elections. On top of being good anti-corruption politics, it's also a matter of national security when you look at stuff like this. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.